Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Growth therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/book now today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/book now. growtherapy.com/book now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
This summer, turn your gifting game up during the Summer Plant and Garden Sale at 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, you can score up to 30% off succulents, bonsais, fresh-cut blooms, and more. Whether you're celebrating a birthday, sending a thank you, or a just because surprise, 1-800-Flowers lets you save big on a stunning selection of gifts. Save up to 30% off during the Summer Plant and Garden Sale at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. Gift something unforgettable today.
This is episode 435 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Claire McManus, Professor of English at Northumbria University in Newcastle in the UK, author of Women on the Renaissance Stage and editor of John Fletcher's The Island Princess. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
Shakespeare mentions the word housewife in his works 14 times, including to identify both a good housewife as well as a false housewife. These descriptions appear alongside one accusation that a woman was being someone's Franklin's housewife. As an essential part of daily living in Shakespeare's England, I wanted to track down exactly what was involved in being a 16th and 17th century housewife, especially if Shakespeare thought there were definitions around good ones versus bad ones. And there was no one better suited to give us the details than Jane Whittle, author of The Experience of Work in Early Modern England and numerous articles about women's work. Jane Whittle is a professor of economic and social history at the University of Exeter. She has published numerous books and articles illuminating the history of everyday life in late medieval and early modern England. Recently, her research has focused on the history of work and particularly women's work. Jane joins us today to explore the 16th century definition of an English housewife, including the nature, jobs, and reputation for this position, as well as to help us understand the history behind Shakespeare's use of that term in his plays. Before we get started today, remember that you can see visual companion illustrations of what we're talking about today inside the members area of That Shakespeare Life. It's the best place to hear ad-free listening of all of our episodes, along with bonus history content. You can scroll through all the extras for this week's show right now at patreon.com/That Shakespeare Life, or click on the members buttons from our episode show notes. And now let's dive into the history. Hello, Jane. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, it's great to be here.
We know from a previous episode discussing alewives that the term wife might have implications about defining a job specifically done by a woman, rather than always indicating marital status. Were housewives always married women, or was the term used to just describe a woman whose job it was to manage a house?
Yeah, it was really the latter. So it was a woman who managed a house. So we can find examples of housewives who were never married and also widows who are described as housewives. So it's really her role in running a household that gives her that label.
In As You Like It, Act 1, Scene 2, the character Celia suggests that they, quote, sit and mock the good housewife, end quote. What was the definition of a good housewife?
So a good housewife is a woman who can manage her resources carefully and run an efficient household. So it's really about kind of being thrifty and making the best of what she has. So it's about management.
In the play Antony and Cleopatra, this comes from Act 4, Scene 15. Cleopatra uses the term false housewife. Does your research shed any light on what a false housewife might have been?
Yeah, so you find housewife being used with an adjective, and a good housewife is a woman who does, the tasks of a housewife really well. But you find women described as bad housewives, false housewives, light housewives, and those were used as a form of insult. So that suggests that she can't manage her affairs, but she's like inefficient or wasteful, maybe idle, not working hard enough, but it also had moral implications. So to be described as a bad housewife might suggest that you were immoral, perhaps adulterous or something, as well as having implications about your work.
In Cymbeline, Act 3, Scene 2, the character of Imogen says, quote, she'll home to her father and provide me presently a riding suit no costlier than would fit a Franklin's housewife. What is a Franklin's housewife, Jane, and why were they wearing riding suits?
Yeah, good question. So a Franklin is someone from a kind of status just below the gentry. So a wealthy farmer would be described as a Franklin, but it's quite an old-fashioned term in the 16th century. So something we find more in medieval documents. By the 16th century, they're more likely to be described as, say, a wealthy yeoman. Why she's wearing a riding suit, I don't know. But I think the comment is about wearing clothing appropriate to someone of a particular status. And here it's saying the status like below the gentry, but still quite respectable.
So again, still tying in with what you said about an adjective describing someone who's doing their job well.
Yeah.
Before we move on in our conversation about housewifery, I want to remind you that you can scroll through coordinating history content about our conversation today by visiting our detailed show notes for members of That Shakespeare Life. Members get access to completely ad-free episodes with our private RSS feed, and they enjoy woodcuts, illustrations, and links to primary documents, along with bonus content provided by our guests from their research, all available inside each episode for members. That Shakespeare Life is powered by listeners just like you who support the show by becoming a member. It helps keep us moving forward and exploring the life of William Shakespeare together each week. Learn more and sign up right now to enjoy this week's bonuses, along with a library of over 150 additional episodes in a back catalog just for members. Find all of these things by clicking the membership buttons on our episode show notes page, or jump over to Patreon directly at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. And now back to the show. In Sonnet 143, Shakespeare writes about the duties of a housewife, saying, quote, as a careful housewife runs to catch one of her feathered creatures broke away, end quote, suggesting that at least part of the job of a housewife was to catch the chickens and presumably prepare them for dinner. That seems predictable. But I get the impression being a housewife was actually a substantial undertaking. Not that catching a chicken is easy by any means. Let's throw that in there. But it really amounted to being the CEO of a family business. Can you explain for us what the typical duties of a housewife would have included for Shakespeare's England?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we look at things like advice books, they list the types of things that a housewife was expected to manage. So in a farming household, she'd manage the dairy, so milking the cows, making butter and cheese. She'd also look after poultry, as your quotation suggests, and she'd manage the vegetable garden, which is providing an important part of the family's diet. She might spin wool or flax, which is a way of earning a bit of extra income for the household. And then she'd do food processing tasks, so things that allow food to be kept through the year. So part of the management process is ensuring there's always something for the household to eat. So that might include brewing beer, baking bread. preserving meat. And then there's a whole set of tasks. Cookery is one of them, but related to that, actually making medicine. So that's something that we might not expect, but this is kind of universal in descriptions of housewives in the 16th century. So she would provide medical care for her family and anyone who's working in that household, like servants, and she might actually make the medicines herself.
In her research into housewifery for Shakespeare's England, Jane writes that women accounted for not an insignificant portion of the workforce in England, including categories like mining and transportation. Jane, explain for us what these categories include, because I was really surprised to hear that women would have been working in these. I think mostly because of how much else I felt like they were handling, but can you quantify this with a number of, how many women were actually working in these positions? And would they have also been housewives while they were accomplishing these other tasks?
Yeah, well, that's quite a complicated question. So let's start with the types of work that women did. So women are 50% of the population, they're 50% of the workforce, and they do a whole range of tasks. So the research I've done has shown that women are working in all the major areas of the economy. Something like mining, well, perhaps not quite so much, but there were women who were involved in mining. Yeah, things like transport that we might characterize as more male forms of work. There are still women who can be observed doing like carrying things on their heads, for instance. So they're going backwards and forwards to market, carrying produce or carrying grain to the mill, that kind of thing. So that's in terms of work. Yes. So women do the things that we might expect them to do, like care work for the family, housework, but they also do a lot of forms of work which would help generate income for the family and household. And in terms of were they housewives? So were these like household heads? We could see like variations. So the types of work that a servant, for instance, did, or a young unmarried woman, was slightly different from what a married woman who's likely to be in charge of a household, or a widow who ran her own household might be. And interestingly, it's the young unmarried women who do most housework. And it's widows who do most care work, because quite a lot of it is medical care and it's quite skilled. So you get a really interesting picture. And it's not always what we'd expect women's work in the past to be.
I know that I'm surprised by a lot of the research Jane's done into women. And if you're curious, like I was, about that comment of women carrying things on their head in Shakespeare's England as a form of transportation, I was really interested in that too. And we could have done a whole podcast episode just on that. And I will point you to Jane's research. She has thankfully written up some great documentation on exactly what that was. So stay tuned for the URL for the show notes. I'll link you over so you can explore that further. Jane, was being a housewife considered a respected position for the 16th and 17th century?
Yes, very much so, if you were a good housewife. So I think that's really interesting because it shows that women's reputation depended partly on their work. If you managed your household well, if you were really careful with resources, that would give you a good reputation in your local community. Unfortunately, it always has a flip side. So there were expectations about what women would do. And if you didn't perform them well, then you would be judged as a bad housewife. And that would detract from your reputation and that of your whole family.
If you are excited to learn more about housewives in Shakespeare's England, I would like to ask Jane to help us understand where we should start. Jane herself has written many resources that are great places to begin. Jane, tell us about those, as well as where you would suggest we begin if we want to dive into this part of history.
Yeah, thank you. So I've just published a book with some co-authors called The Experience of Work in Early Modern England. And that book's available open access, so anyone can read it. You don't have to pay in order to read it. So it'd be great if people had a look at that. And that's really at getting at everyday life and looks as much at women's work as men's work. So it's hopefully a great introduction into how people live their lives in the 16th and 17th century. Also, if you're interested in the way historians think about women's work, I've written an article called A Critique of Approaches to Domestic Work. And that's all about how often women's role is assumed to be purely domestic and how that gets theorized by historians and economists. So if you're interested in that, that's an article in the journal Past and Present. And then finally, you might like to read a book I wrote some years ago now called Consumption and Gender in the Early 17th Century Household. And that's a book that really dives into one particular household using a fantastic set of household accounts, which were actually kept by a woman. So that's a really nice window into how one gentry household was run in that period.
It's just an amazing amount of work into women and housewives and their place in Shakespeare's England and before that Jane has done here. I feel really honored to get to speak with you about this topic, and we will place links to these valuable and useful resources in the show notes today. So make sure you visit there to see more about Jane and her work. This is a really great place to begin if you want to learn more about housewives as well as about women and what they were working on in Shakespeare's England. Jane, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible. So your choice would be in addition to those.
Okay, this is a really difficult question, actually. I've gone for something that's probably quite conventional, but I would like to take George Eliot's Middlemarch with me, because I thought it's a book that you can read again and again and get lots out of, and it will remind me of the English countryside. And
it connects back to women too. I love it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. That's a great selection. Well, what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
So at the moment, I'm working on a project all about wills. So we've used new technology to transcribe 30,000 early modern wills from England. And we're looking at how bequests change over time. And it's just fascinating reading people's wills.
Oh, I can only imagine. Can't wait to see what you discover there. Thank you so much, Jane Whittle, for being here this week and helping us understand housewife and housewifery for Shakespeare's England, and explore what women were doing and exactly what we can understand about this term when we hear it in Shakespeare's plays.
Thank you so much.
To join in on this conversation and add your thoughts and comments about housewifery in Shakespeare's England, be sure to check out today's show notes. You can see links to our guest and their work, as well as the resources they recommend for you today. Find all of these things at CassidyCash.com/episode 435. Don't forget to click the membership buttons while you're there if you want to access the bonus history that coordinates with today's show. Again, that URL is CassidyCash.com/EP435. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.